What if I told you that the worst day of my life turned into the moment that made me a millionaire? What if I told you that my cheating husband's biggest betrayal actually set me free? And what if I told you that my 73-year-old mother-in-law had been planning the most epic revenge plot for months, and I had no idea I was the hero of her story? Hi, I'm Hallie, and 3 years ago, I thought my life was over. Today, I'm about to tell you how one rainy Tuesday morning turned me from a broken, betrayed wife into a woman worth $8 million. But here's the crazy part. The money was just the beginning. What happened after that inheritance? That's where this story gets absolutely insane. So grab your coffee, because this is going to be a ride. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never look at family loyalty, marriage, or revenge the same way again. Let me paint you a picture of who I was 3 years ago. I was 34, married for 8 years to David Richmond, and I thought I was living the American dream. David worked for his family's investment firm. Old money. You know the type. We had the perfect house in Lincoln Park, the perfect social circle, and from the outside, the perfect marriage. But here's what nobody saw. I was dying inside. For 2 years, I'd been watching my husband transform into a stranger. Late nights at the office turned into weekend business trips. Passionate kisses goodbye became quick pecks on the cheek. And when I'd try to talk to him about it, he'd look at me like I was crazy and say things like, "You're being paranoid, Hallie. I'm building our future. Our future." What a joke. The worst part? I knew something was wrong, but I kept gaslighting myself. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe this was just what marriage looked like after 8 years. Maybe I needed to try harder, be better, lose weight, cook more, complain less. Ladies, if you're watching this and you recognize yourself in what I'm saying, stop. Just stop. Because what I'm about to tell you will show you exactly why trusting your gut is the most important thing you'll ever do. The only person who seemed to really see me during this time was Eleanor Richmond, David's mother. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mother-in-law support? That's rare, right? But Eleanor was different. She was this elegant, brilliant woman who'd built her own real estate empire back when women weren't supposed to be in business at all. Every Thursday, we'd have tea at her penthouse on Park Avenue. She never directly asked about my marriage, but she had this way of looking at me, like she could see straight into my soul. She'd hold my hand just a little longer when I'd leave, or she'd text me these beautiful quotes about strength and self-worth. The last time I saw Eleanor alive was 3 weeks before she died. She was 73, but her mind was sharp as a knife. She was sitting in her sunroom, wrapped in this gorgeous cashmere shawl, and she took my hand and said something I'll never forget. "Hallie, my darling, you are so much stronger than you know, and sometimes the universe has to break us completely before it can rebuild us into who we're meant to be." I thought she was just being philosophical. I had no idea she was about to orchestrate the most incredible plot twist of my entire life. Eleanor died on a Monday. By Wednesday, I received a formal letter requesting my presence at the reading of her will that Friday morning. I was confused. I mean, I loved Eleanor, but I was just the daughter-in-law. I figured maybe she'd left me a piece of jewelry or a small gift as a token of her affection. I could not have been more wrong. So there I was, Friday morning, December 15th, sitting in my car outside Morrison & Associates law firm in downtown Chicago. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see the building, and my hands were shaking, not from the cold, but because of what I was about to walk into. You see, the letter had mentioned that all relevant family members would be present. I knew David would be there, obviously. What I didn't know was that I was about to come face to face with a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. I grabbed my umbrella and ran toward the building, and that's when I saw them. David was standing under the covered entrance, looking as polished and confident as ever in his $3,000 Navy suit. But he wasn't alone. Standing next to him, laughing at something on her phone like she didn't have a care in the world, was Sophia Martinez. Now, I knew Sophia. She was 28, worked in marketing at David's company, and every time David mentioned her name, his whole demeanor would change. He'd get this little smile, this energy that I hadn't seen him have about anything or anyone in years. But seeing her there, at his mother's will reading, was weird enough. What made my blood turn to ice was what she was holding. A baby carrier, with a newborn baby inside. The baby had David's nose, David's chin. And when Sophia looked up and saw me staring, she smiled this smug little smile and shifted the carrier so I could get a better look. That's when it hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just an affair. This was a whole other life, a whole other family. And I was the idiot wife who'd been at home cooking dinner while my husband was playing house with someone else. David saw me standing there in the rain. And you know what he did? He didn't look ashamed. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. Like I was ruining his day by existing. Sophia whispered something to him, and they both laughed. Actually laughed. At my expense, while I stood there soaking wet, staring at the baby that proved my marriage had been a lie for God knows how long. Every instinct I had told me to run, to get back in my car, drive home, pack my bags, and disappear. But then I heard Eleanor's voice in my head. You are so much stronger than you know. So I did something that surprised even me. I walked right past them, looked Sophia dead in the eye, and said, "Congratulations. He's beautiful." My voice was steady, calm, even though my heart was exploding in my chest. And then I walked into that building like I owned the place. The law office was exactly what you'd expect from a firm that handled 8-figure estates. All marble and mahogany, and the smell of expensive leather. A receptionist directed us to a conference room on the 20th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that would have had an amazing view if not for the storm. David and Sophia sat on one side of this massive table, whispering and occasionally glancing at me like I was some kind of curiosity. Sophia was bouncing the baby gently, and I noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. David wasn't either. Actually, when had he stopped wearing his wedding ring? I sat alone on the other side, my hands folded in my lap, trying to look composed while my entire world crumbled around me. The only sound was this antique clock ticking in the corner and the soft murmur of their conversation. After what felt like forever, the door opened, and in walked James Morrison, Eleanor's attorney and family friend for over 20 years. He was this distinguished gentleman with silver hair and the kind of calm presence that comes from delivering life-changing news for decades. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. T. Morrison said, settling into his chair with a thick manila folder. "Thank you for being here today. We're gathered to read the last will and testament of Mrs. Eleanor Richmond." He looked at each of us in turn, and I swear I saw something in his eyes when he looked at me. Not pity, but something almost like anticipation. "I want you to know," he continued, "that Mrs. Richmond was very specific about her wishes. This document was prepared with great care, and she was absolutely of sound mind when she signed it 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago. That would have been right after our last tea together, when she'd held my hand and talked about the universe breaking us to rebuild us. Mr. Morrison opened the folder and began with all the legal formalities, the standard language about being of sound mind and disposing of worldly possessions. David was drumming his fingers on the table, clearly impatient to get to the good stuff. Sophia was still bouncing the baby, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Then Mr. Morrison got to the actual bequests, and that's when my life changed forever. To my beloved daughter-in-law, Hallie Richmond, he read, and my heart stopped. I leave the following assets in recognition of the unwavering love, loyalty, and grace she has shown me, and in acknowledgement of the strength she will need for the journey ahead. I blinked hard, certain I'd misheard, but Mr. Morrison's voice was clear and steady as he continued. The penthouse apartment at 1247 Park Avenue, including all furnishings and artwork, currently valued at $3.2 million. The words hit me like physical blows. David's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. The estate in the Hamptons, including the main house, guest house, and all 12 acres, valued at $2.8 million. Sophia's mouth fell open. The baby started to fuss, but she didn't seem to notice. The complete investment portfolio, including blue-chip stocks, bonds, and the private equity holdings, currently valued at $2.1 million. David was shaking his head like he could make the words disappear. No, he whispered. No, that can't be right. But Mr. Morrison wasn't finished. In addition, I leave to Hallie the complete collection of jewelry, including the Richmond family emeralds that have been passed down for 4 generations, the vintage Steinway piano, and the sum of $50,000 in cash for immediate expenses. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there, completely numb, while David's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, fury, and then something that looked almost like panic. Sophia found her voice first. "This is insane," she burst out, her careful composure finally cracking. "David is her son, her only child. This woman is just—" She gestured at me like I was something disgusting she'd found on her shoe. "Just what?" I asked quietly, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "There must be some mistake," David said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "My mother would never. She couldn't have been thinking clearly. She was old. She was sick." Mr. Morrison looked up from the document with completely calm eyes. "Mrs. Richmond was 73 years old and in perfect mental health when she executed this will. She was not sick, and she was certainly not confused. In fact, she was quite specific about her reasons, which she outlined in personal letters." "Letters?" David's voice cracked on the word. Mr. Morrison nodded and pulled out 2 sealed envelopes. "She left personal messages for both of you." He opened the first envelope, which was addressed to me in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "My dearest Hallie," he began, and I felt tears spring to my eyes immediately. "If you are hearing this, then my plan has worked, and you are about to discover just how much you mean to me." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "You are not just my daughter-in-law. You are the daughter I never had, the woman I always hoped my son would be wise enough to cherish. But I have watched him take your kindness for granted, watched him treat your love like it was disposable, and I cannot leave this world without setting things right." David made a strangled sound, but Mr. Morrison continued reading. "I know about Sophia. I know about the baby. I hired a private investigator 3 months ago, and I have photographs, phone records, and hotel receipts that document the entire affair. I know that David has been lying to you, manipulating you, and making you question your own sanity. I am so sorry I didn't intervene sooner." The words hit me like a tsunami. Eleanor had known everything. She'd seen my pain, my confusion, my self-doubt, and she'd been gathering evidence. But here's what David doesn't know. Mr. Morrison continued, and I saw David's face go pale. The family business that he thinks he's inheriting, the business that's been supporting his lifestyle and funding his affair, I sold my shares 6 months ago. The new owners are under no obligation to keep him employed. David shot to his feet so fast his chair fell over backward. What? She couldn't have... The company has been in our family for 60 years. She could, and she did. Mr. Morrison said calmly. And there's more. He continued reading Eleanor's letter. Hallie, my darling, you are about to be very wealthy, but more importantly, you are about to be free. Use this gift to build the life you deserve, not the life you settled for. Travel, learn, grow, love again. But this time, love someone who sees your worth. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face as Eleanor's words wrapped around me like a warm embrace. To my son, Mr. Morrison said, opening the second envelope. David sat back down heavily, his face ashen. David, I am profoundly disappointed in the man you have become. I raised you to value integrity, loyalty, and honor. Instead, you have chosen deceit, selfishness, and cruelty. David flinched like he'd been slapped. You had a wife who loved you unconditionally, who supported your dreams and overlooked your flaws. Instead of treasuring that gift, you threw it away for momentary pleasure and ego gratification. You broke the heart of the best person I know, and for that, I cannot forgive you. Sophia was staring at David like she was seeing him for the first time. The baby was crying now, but no one moved to comfort him. I leave you nothing, because you have proven that you value nothing that truly matters. Perhaps being forced to build your own life from scratch will teach you the character I failed to instill in you. The letter concluded with a final devastating blow. The prenuptial agreement you insisted Hallie sign 8 years ago has been nullified. I paid for her own legal representation, and they found several clauses that make the document invalid. She owes you nothing. When Mr. Morrison finished reading, the silence was absolute. David was staring at the table like he could burn a hole through it with his eyes. Sophia was rocking the crying baby, but her face was stone cold. And me, for the first time in years, I felt powerful. There's one more thing, Mr. Morrison said, pulling out a final document. Mrs. Richmond anticipated that there might be attempts to contest this will. She had her mental competency evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists just 2 weeks ago. All declared her to be in perfect mental health. She also recorded a video statement explaining her decisions, which I'm required to show you if anyone challenges the will's validity. David's hands were shaking. I want to see it, he whispered. Mr. Morrison turned a laptop toward us and pressed play. Eleanor's face filled the screen, and she looked directly into the camera with those sharp, intelligent eyes I knew so well. Hello, David, she said, and even through the speakers, her voice was strong and clear. If you're watching this, it means you're considering challenging my will. I want you to understand that every decision I made was deliberate and final. She leaned forward slightly. For 2 years, I watched you destroy your marriage. I watched you lie to a woman who deserved so much better than you. I watched you build a secret life while Hallie cooked your dinner and pressed your shirts and made excuses for your absence to our friends. David's face crumpled. I will not leave my fortune to a man who has no honor. Hallie will use this inheritance to build something beautiful. You would have used it to fund more lies, more affairs, more selfishness. The choice was easy. The video ended, and the room fell silent again. That's when Sophia finally spoke. This is humiliating, she hissed, standing up abruptly with the baby. David, you told me she adored you. You told me the inheritance would set us up for life. You told me you were getting divorced. She looked down at him with disgust. You're not the man I thought you were. You're just another lying, broke loser. And with that, she walked out, taking the baby and David's entire future with her. David sat there alone, broken, while I signed papers that made me one of the wealthiest women in Chicago. When I finally stood to leave, David looked up at me with desperate eyes. Hallie, please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Don't let my mother's anger destroy what we built together. I looked down at this man who had been my husband for 8 years, who had shared my bed and my dreams and my trust, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no love. Just a vast, peaceful emptiness where all those toxic emotions used to live. David, I said quietly, we didn't build anything together. You built lies, and I built a fantasy around them. But that's over now. I walked out of that conference room and into the rest of my life. But here's where this story gets really crazy. Because inheriting $8 million was just the beginning. What I did next, where I went, and who I became. That's when this story turns from a simple tale of revenge into something absolutely extraordinary. And trust me, you are not going to believe what happened when I decided to disappear completely and start over. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming someone so amazing that your old life looks like a prison you escaped from. The first thing I did after walking out of that law office was sit in my car for 20 minutes. Just breathing. $8 million. $8 million and complete freedom from a man who had made me feel worthless for years. The rain had stopped, and for the first time in months, I could see actual sunlight breaking through the clouds. But here's the thing about sudden wealth. It doesn't immediately fix the broken parts of yourself. I was still the same woman who'd spent 2 years questioning her own sanity. Still the same person who'd made excuses for a cheating husband. The money was just the tool. I still had to figure out how to use it. My phone buzzed with a text from David. We need to talk. This is insane. Come home so we can figure this out. I stared at that message for a full minute. And then I did something I'd never done before. I blocked his number. Just like that. 8 years of marriage. And I ended it with the press of a button. The second text came from an unknown number. Probably Sophia. You think you've won something? He'll never love you the way he loves me. Enjoy your blood money. I screenshotted it. Blocked that number too. And then I started laughing. Actually laughing, sitting alone in my car in downtown Chicago, because I finally understood something. Their anger meant I'd already won. But I knew David wouldn't give up that easily. He was going to fight this, contest the will, make my life hell in whatever way he could. So I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to disappear. Not forever. Just long enough to become someone he couldn't touch. I drove straight to Eleanor's penthouse, my penthouse now, and used the key Mr. Morrison had given me. Walking into that space felt surreal. Everything was exactly as Eleanor had left it. Her reading glasses on the side table, her favorite cashmere throw draped over the armchair, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. But there was also something new, a manila envelope on the kitchen counter with my name written in Eleanor's handwriting. Inside was another letter, but this one was different. It was practical, detailed, like Eleanor knew exactly what I'd need to hear in this moment. My dearest Hallie, it began. If you're reading this in the penthouse, then you've taken the first step toward your new life. But I know you, my darling. You're probably scared, overwhelmed, and wondering what to do next. So let me help you one last time. The letter included the contact information for Eleanor's personal banker, her travel agent, her security company, and something I hadn't expected: the name and number of a therapist she'd been seeing for years. Dr. Sarah Chen helped me navigate the most difficult period of my life. The letter continued. She'll help you understand that healing isn't just about time, it's about choice. You have to choose to believe you deserve better. You have to choose to rebuild yourself from the inside out. But the most important part of the letter was at the end. There's a lockbox in my bedroom closet, behind the safe you already know about. The combination is your birthday, the day you became my daughter. Inside, you'll find everything you need to disappear for as long as you want to. I found the lockbox exactly where she said it would be. Inside was a passport I'd never seen before. My photo, but with the name Helena Foster. There was also $50,000 in cash, credit cards in the Helena Foster name, and what looked like a complete identity kit. Along with it was a note. Sometimes we have to become someone else to remember who we really are. Helena is who you can be when no one is watching, when no one has expectations, when you're free to discover yourself. Use her wisely. Eleanor had been planning this for months, maybe even years. She'd seen my pain, my slow disappearance into David's shadow, and she'd prepared an escape route I didn't even know I needed. That night, I called Dr. Chen. Just hearing her voice, calm, professional, but somehow warm, made me start crying for the first time since the will reading. Eleanor told me about you, she said gently. She was very worried about your well-being and very hopeful about your future. Would you like to come in and talk? I saw Dr. Chen the next morning, and she asked me a question that changed everything. Hallie, when was the last time you made a decision based on what you wanted, not what someone else expected from you? I sat there for 10 minutes in complete silence, because I couldn't remember. Not once in my adult life had I made a major decision purely for myself. That's where we start, she said. We start with you, learning to trust your own voice again. Over the next 2 weeks, I met with Dr. Chen every day. We talked about gaslighting, about how abusers make you question your own reality. We talked about the difference between guilt and shame, about how I'd internalized David's criticisms until they became my own inner voice. But we also talked about something else, what I actually wanted my life to look like. For years, I'd been living David's version of success: the right house, the right social circles, the right charity events. But what did I want? What made me happy when no one else was watching? The answer surprised me. I wanted to travel. I wanted to learn languages, try new foods, wake up in places where no one knew my story. I wanted to be anonymous and free and curious about the world again. So that's exactly what I did. I liquidated half of the investment portfolio, about $1 million, and put it into easily accessible accounts under the Helena Foster identity. I arranged for a property management company to handle the penthouse and the Hamptons house. And then, 3 weeks after the will reading, Helena Foster boarded a plane to Barcelona with nothing but a carry-on bag and the most detailed travel itinerary Eleanor's travel agent had ever created. The first month was hard, really hard. I'd wake up in beautiful hotels and have panic attacks because I didn't know how to be alone with myself. I'd been defining myself through other people for so long that without David's expectations or Eleanor's guidance, I felt completely lost. But then something started to shift. It happened in a small cafe in Barcelona, where I was sitting alone with a book and a cup of coffee. A woman at the next table was struggling with her Spanish, trying to order lunch, and without thinking, I helped translate. We ended up talking for 3 hours about art, travel, life. She had no idea who I was, where I came from, what I'd been through. To her, I was just Helena, an interesting American woman who spoke decent Spanish and had opinions about Gaudí. For the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to be seen as myself, not as David's wife or Eleanor's daughter-in-law, just me. From Barcelona, I went to Morocco, then to Greece, then to Thailand. I spent 6 months moving through the world as Helena Foster, and slowly, something incredible happened. I started to remember who I was before I became who I thought I should be. In Marrakech, I learned to haggle in the souks and discovered I was actually pretty good at negotiation, something David had always done for us because he said I was too nice to get good deals. In Santorini, I took a painting class and found out I had an eye for color and composition. I'd always wanted to try art, but David had called it frivolous and a waste of time. In Bangkok, I took a cooking class and realized I was an amazing cook when I wasn't trying to recreate someone else's idea of the perfect meal. But the real transformation happened in a small mountain village in northern Thailand, where I volunteered at a school for a month. The kids there didn't speak much English, and I didn't speak much Thai. But somehow we communicated through games and laughter and art projects. One day, a little girl named Nim drew a picture of me teaching her class. In the drawing, I was smiling this huge, genuine smile, bigger than any smile I'd ever seen in photos from my marriage. When I looked at that drawing, I realized something that took my breath away. I was happy, actually, genuinely happy. Not because I'd gotten revenge on David, not because I was rich, but because for the first time in years, I was living authentically. I called Dr. Chen that night from a cafe with spotty Wi-Fi, crying happy tears. I remember now, I told her. I remember who I am when I'm not trying to be perfect for someone else. And who is that? She asked. Someone who's curious about everything, someone who makes friends easily, someone who's brave enough to try new things, someone who's actually pretty funny when she's not walking on eggshells. After 6 months abroad, I was ready to come home, but not to the life I'd left behind. I was ready to build something entirely new. I flew back to Chicago on a Tuesday in June, and the first thing I did was go to the penthouse. It felt different now, not like Eleanor's space that I was borrowing, but like a blank canvas waiting for me to make it mine. The second thing I did was finally deal with David. He'd been trying to contact me through lawyers, through mutual friends, through anyone who might have information about where I'd gone. Apparently, he'd contested the will, hired investigators to find me, and even shown up at the penthouse multiple times demanding entry. But here's what he didn't know. Eleanor's security company had been documenting everything, every attempt to break in, every threatening message, every time he'd harassed the building staff. All of it was on video. All of it was evidence. And all of it proved exactly why Eleanor had been right to cut him out. When I met with Mistress Morrison to review David's legal challenges, he had good news and great news. The good news was that David's contest of the will had been thrown out of court. Eleanor's mental competency evaluations, combined with her video statement and the detailed documentation of David's affair, made his case completely baseless. The great news was even better. David had violated the restraining order I'd filed before leaving the country. His attempts to access the penthouse, combined with his harassment of building staff and his threatening messages, had landed him in serious legal trouble. He's facing charges for criminal harassment and violation of a protective order, Mr. Morrison explained. His lawyer is recommending he accept a plea deal that includes mandatory anger management and a permanent no-contact order. But here's the most beautiful part. While I'd been discovering myself in Thailand, David's life had completely imploded. Sophia had left him within a week of the will reading, taking the baby and moving back to her parents' house in California. She'd also filed for child support, which was particularly problematic since David no longer had a job. The new owners of the family investment firm had fired him 2 weeks after Eleanor's death, citing concerns about his judgment and character. Apparently, having an affair with a subordinate while lying to your family doesn't inspire confidence in potential business partners. He'd been forced to sell the Lincoln Park house to pay legal fees, and he was currently living in a studio apartment in a neighborhood he used to call beneath him. Meanwhile, Sophia had been busy on social media, posting about what a lying, manipulative deadbeat he was, complete with screenshots of their old text conversations where he'd promised her Eleanor's inheritance. The man who'd once made me feel worthless was now worth less than nothing, while I was sitting in a multi-million-dollar penthouse, planning my next adventure. But you know what? I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel satisfied by his suffering. I felt nothing. Complete, peaceful indifference. Because here's what I'd learned during those months abroad. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's apathy. And I had achieved perfect apathy toward David Richmond. He was simply irrelevant to my life now. With the legal drama settled, I was free to focus on what really mattered, building the life I actually wanted. I'd realized during my travels that what made me happiest was helping people, creating connections, building community. So I decided to use Eleanor's gift in a way that would have made her proud. I started with the Hamptons house, instead of keeping it as a private retreat. I turned it into something extraordinary, a residential retreat center for women leaving abusive relationships. I worked with domestic violence organizations to create a program where women could stay for up to 6 months, getting therapy, job training, and legal support while living in a safe, beautiful environment. We offered everything from financial literacy classes to art therapy to coding boot camps. The program was completely free, funded by Eleanor's inheritance, and managed by people who understood trauma and recovery. We opened the first session with 12 women, and watching them transform over those 6 months was like watching flowers bloom and fast forward. Women who'd arrived broken and afraid left with new skills, new confidence, and new hope. But the real magic happened when they started supporting each other. They formed friendships that lasted long after the program ended. They created a network of women who understood each other's struggles and celebrated each other's victories. One of our first graduates, a woman named Maria who'd left her husband after 20 years of abuse, sent me a photo 6 months later. She was standing in front of her own apartment, the first place she'd ever lived alone, holding the keys and grinning from ear to ear. "I never thought I could do this," her message said. "But you showed me that leaving isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning." That's when I knew I'd found my purpose. The penthouse became my headquarters for what I started calling the Eleanor Richmond Foundation. We expanded beyond the Hamptons retreat to include emergency housing, legal aid, job placement services, and educational scholarships. Within 2 years, we'd helped over 200 women rebuild their lives. We'd prevented countless suicides, reunited mothers with their children, and helped women discover strengths they never knew they had. And me? I discovered that running a foundation suited me perfectly. I was good at fundraising because I genuinely believed in the cause. I was good at managing programs because I understood the journey from victim to survivor. And I was good at inspiring other people because my own transformation was living proof that change was possible. But just when I thought I'd figured out my new life, something happened that would change everything again. His name was Marcus Chen. Dr. Sarah Chen's younger brother and the most beautiful man I'd ever seen in real life. He was 36, a documentary filmmaker who specialized in social justice stories. And he walked into my office on a random Thursday afternoon with a proposal that would turn my carefully organized world upside down. "I want to make a film about your foundation," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told he wasn't good enough. "Why?" I asked, immediately suspicious. I'd learned to be careful about people who wanted to tell my story. He smiled, and I swear it was like someone had turned on additional lighting in the room. "Because what you're doing here isn't just charity work. It's revolutionary. You're not just helping individual women, you're challenging an entire system that tells them they don't deserve better." We talked for 3 hours that day. About the foundation, about the women we served, about the broader issues of domestic violence and economic empowerment. But we also talked about travel, about art, about the books we'd loved and the places we wanted to see. When he left, I sat in my office for a long time, trying to identify the feeling in my chest. It took me a while to recognize it because it had been so long since I'd felt it. Attraction, not just physical, though he was definitely attractive, but intellectual and emotional attraction to someone who saw the world the way I did. Marcus started coming around regularly to research his documentary. He interviewed our graduates, filmed our programs, and slowly became part of the fabric of our daily operations. But he also became something else: my friend, then my confidant, then something more complicated that I wasn't ready to name. The problem was, I'd sworn off men entirely. Not forever, but definitely for the foreseeable future. I was happy being single, happy being independent, happy not having to consider anyone else's needs or opinions when making decisions. But Marcus wasn't David. He didn't try to manage my life, or change my opinions, or make me smaller to make himself feel bigger. He challenged me to think differently, encouraged my ideas, and treated me like an equal partner in every conversation. Still, I kept him at arm's length for months. I'd learned the hard way that men could be charming and supportive until they had you hooked, and then everything changed. But Marcus was patient in a way that felt genuine, not calculated. He never pushed for more than I was comfortable giving. He never made me feel guilty for being cautious. He just kept showing up, being consistently kind and respectful and interesting. The turning point came during a particularly difficult week at the foundation. One of our residents, a woman named Jennifer, had been found by her abusive ex-husband. He'd shown up at our Hamptons location, drunk and violent, demanding to see her. Our security team handled the situation perfectly. They called the police, kept everyone safe, and the man was arrested. But Jennifer was traumatized, convinced that she'd put everyone else in danger by being there. I spent 2 days talking her through it, assuring her that she belonged at the retreat, that her safety mattered, that her ex-husband's actions were not her fault. But I could see the doubt in her eyes, the old familiar shame creeping back in. That night, I was sitting in my penthouse, exhausted and frustrated, when Marcus texted, "Heard it was a rough week. Want company? I bring excellent takeout and mediocre jokes." Something about the casual offer, the way he acknowledged my stress without making it about him, made me say yes. He showed up with Thai food from my favorite restaurant, a bottle of wine, and a documentary about women's rights activists that he thought I'd find inspiring. We ate dinner on the couch, talking about the foundation, about Jennifer's situation, about the broader challenges of helping women escape abuse. And then he said something that stopped me cold. "You know what's amazing about what you do? You don't just save people. You show them how to save themselves. No one had ever described my work that way before. Most people saw the foundation as charity, as me being generous with Eleanor's money. But Marcus saw it for what it really was: empowerment, transformation, revolution. That's exactly what Eleanor did for me, I said quietly. She didn't rescue me. She gave me the tools to rescue myself. And now you're giving those tools to other people, he said. It's like emotional archaeology. You're helping people dig up the person they were before the world told them they weren't enough. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Because Marcus didn't just see me. He understood me. He got what I was trying to do in a way that even I sometimes struggled to articulate. We ended up talking until 3 a.m., curled up on opposite ends of the couch, sharing stories about our childhoods, our fears, our dreams for the future. It was the most intimate conversation I'd had with anyone in years, and we hadn't even touched. When he finally left, he paused at the door and said, "Hallie, I know you're careful about trusting people. I know you have good reasons to be, but I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this is between us, whatever it becomes or doesn't become, I'm your friend first, always." And then he kissed my forehead, like a promise, and walked away. I stood in my doorway for 10 minutes after he left, my hand pressed to the spot where his lips had been, finally understanding what Eleanor had meant when she wrote about the universe breaking us down to build us back up. Because standing there in my beautiful penthouse, surrounded by the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage, I realized I was ready for the next chapter. I was ready to let someone in again. Not to complete me, I was already complete. Not to save me, I'd already saved myself. But to walk alongside me as I continued becoming the person I was always meant to be. The woman David had tried to diminish was gone forever. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and infinitely more interesting. Someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't settle for anything less than she deserved. Someone who understood that love shouldn't make you smaller, it should make you bigger, braver, more yourself than you've ever been. Someone who was finally ready to find out what that kind of love might look like. But that's when the real plot twist happened. Because just as I was opening my heart to the possibility of love again, someone from my past showed up who would test everything I thought I knew about forgiveness, justice, and moving on. And this time, it wasn't David who came knocking on my door. The person who came knocking on my door 3 months later wasn't someone I expected to see ever again. It was my mother, Patricia Williams, the woman who'd given birth to me and then spent the next 34 years making me feel like an inconvenience. The woman who'd sided with David during our entire marriage, constantly telling me I was lucky to have found such a successful man and that I should stop being so needy when I tried to talk about our problems. She was standing in my penthouse doorway at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, holding a designer handbag that probably cost more than most people's rent, wearing the kind of fake smile I remembered from my childhood. "Hello, darling," she said, brushing past me into the apartment like she'd been invited. This place is lovely. Eleanor certainly had exquisite taste. I stood there for a moment, completely stunned. My mother and I hadn't spoken since David and I separated. She'd made it clear whose side she was on when she'd told me I was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me, and that Eleanor was a meddling old woman who didn't understand modern marriage. "What are you doing here, Mom?" She settled herself on my couch like she owned the place, looking around with calculating eyes. "Well, I heard about your little windfall. Of course. David told me all about Eleanor's..." Dramatic gesture. I thought it was time we had a chat. The way she said windfall, like my inheritance was some kind of lottery win rather than the result of 8 years of emotional abuse and Eleanor's careful planning, made my stomach turn. David told you? I sat down across from her, maintaining distance. When exactly did you talk to David? Oh, we've been in touch regularly since this whole mess started, she said casually, examining her manicured nails. He's been quite upset, as you can imagine, losing his mother and his inheritance at the same time. It's been very hard on him. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. His inheritance? Mom, David cheated on me for 2 years. He had a baby with another woman. Eleanor left me her money because she watched him destroy our marriage. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Oh, Hallie, you're being so dramatic. Men make mistakes. David was going through a difficult time, and that woman took advantage of him. The important thing is that he's learned from it, and he's ready to make things right. I stared at my mother, really stared at her, and saw something I'd missed my entire life. She wasn't just unsupportive, she was actively harmful. Make things right? I asked quietly. How exactly is David planning to make things right? Her smile widened, and that's when I saw the trap she thought she was setting. Well, that's why I'm here, sweetheart. David has been working with a wonderful therapist, and he's realized how much he hurt you. He wants to reconcile. He wants to rebuild your marriage and start fresh. She leaned forward, her voice taking on that manipulative tone I remembered from childhood arguments. Think about it, Hallie. You could have everything, your husband back, a stable marriage, and all of Eleanor's money. You could be one of the most powerful couples in Chicago. And what does David get out of this reconciliation? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Well, naturally, as your husband, he'd help you manage the inheritance. He has the business experience, after all. And really, darling, $8 million is a lot of responsibility for someone like you. Someone like me. There it was. The message I'd been receiving from my mother my entire life, that I wasn't smart enough, capable enough, worthy enough to handle big decisions on my own. Someone like me, I repeated slowly. What exactly do you mean by that? Oh, you know what I mean. You've always been so emotional, so impractical. You need someone stable to guide you. David made one little mistake, but he's learned from it. He's ready to be the husband you need. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just my mother's idea. This was a coordinated effort. David had sent her here because he thought she could manipulate me in ways he couldn't. He was using my own mother as a weapon against me. Did David ask you to come here tonight? She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. We discussed it. Yes. He's too proud to come himself, but he loves you. Hallie. He wants his family back. His family, I said, standing up. What about Sophia's baby? What about his other family? That was a mistake, Patricia said firmly. He's cutting all ties with that woman, the baby. Well, these things can be worked out with lawyers. The important thing is that you two belong together. I walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline, trying to process what was happening. My mother was sitting in my living room, asking me to take back a man who'd betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and she was acting like it was the obvious choice. Mom, I said, without turning around, do you remember what you told me when I was 16 and Tommy Morrison cheated on me at prom? I heard her shift uncomfortably on the couch. Hallie, that was completely different. You told me that any man who would cheat on me wasn't worth my tears. You said I deserved better than someone who would humiliate me in front of our friends. You said I should never settle for less than I was worth. I turned back to face her. What changed? Why was I worth more when I was 16 than I am now? Because you're not 16 anymore, she snapped, her carefully constructed facade cracking. You're 34 years old, Hallie. You're not getting any younger. And good men are hard to find. David made a mistake, but he's still one of the best catches in Chicago. Without him, what do you have? Money. Yes. But money doesn't love you back. Money doesn't give you children or grandchildren to spoil. And there it was. The truth I'd been running from my entire life. My mother didn't see me as a person with inherent worth. She saw me as a commodity that was depreciating with age, and David was the best deal I was ever going to get. What if I told you I don't want children? I asked quietly. Don't be ridiculous. Every woman wants children. What if I told you I'd rather be alone and happy than married and miserable? You're not thinking clearly. The divorce, the money, it's all made you confused about what's important. I sat back down, leaning forward so she had to look me in the eye. Mom, what if I told you that I've spent the last 2 years building a foundation that's helped over 200 women escape abusive relationships? What if I told you that I've found work that gives my life meaning and purpose? What if I told you that I've traveled to 6 countries, learned 3 languages, and discovered that I'm actually a pretty interesting person when I'm not trying to make myself smaller for someone else's comfort? She stared at me blankly. That's all very nice, dear. But it's not a life. It's a distraction from real life. And what's real life? Marriage, family, stability, the things that matter when you're old and alone? I felt something break inside me, not in a painful way, but like a chain snapping. For 34 years, I'd been trying to earn my mother's approval, trying to become the daughter she wanted me to be. But sitting there, listening to her reduce my transformation into a distraction, I finally understood something crucial. Her approval wasn't worth having. I need you to leave, I said quietly. Hallie, don't be hasty. Just think about what David is offering. I need you to leave now. She stood up, clutching her purse, her face flushing with anger. You're making a mistake. Hallie, a huge mistake. When you're 40 and alone, don't come crying to me. I won't, I said, walking to the door and opening it. Because I'll never be alone in the way you mean. I have friends who actually see me and support me. I have work that matters. And someday, if I choose it, I'll have a partner who loves me for who I am, not who he thinks I should be. She paused at the door, her expression shifting to something that might have been panic. Hallie, please. I'm your mother. I'm trying to help you. No, I said firmly. You're trying to fix what you see as my mistake in leaving David. Because my independence makes you uncomfortable. But I'm not broken, Mom. For the first time in my life, I'm whole. After she left, I called Marcus. I didn't even think about it. I just needed to hear a voice that knew who I really was. Hey, he said, and I could hear him smiling. How was your day? Complicated, I said, curling up on the couch where my mother had been sitting. My mother just left. She came here to convince me to take David back. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. And how do you feel about that? Like I just had the final conversation with my childhood, I said. Like I just closed a door I didn't even know was still open. Do you want me to come over? I closed my eyes, feeling something settle into place. Yes, I really do. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of wine and a bag of takeout from our favorite Thai place. More importantly, he brought himself, his presence, his understanding, his complete lack of judgment about my family drama. We sat on the floor of my living room, eating pad thai and drinking wine, and I told him everything. About my mother's visit, about David's orchestrated campaign to win me back, about the lifetime of messages that had convinced me I wasn't enough on my own. You know what's crazy? I said, setting down my wine glass. 6 months ago, if my mother had come here with that speech, I probably would have considered it. Not because I wanted David back, but because the idea of disappointing her terrified me more than the idea of being unhappy. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying my face in the soft light from the candles I'd lit. And now? Now I know that her disappointment in me says more about her than it does about me. She raised me to believe that my value was determined by what man was willing to claim me. But Eleanor saw something different. She saw a woman worth $8 million and the trust to use it wisely. Eleanor was right, Marcus said quietly. I looked at him, this beautiful, kind man who'd been patiently waiting for me to be ready for whatever this was between us. Marcus, can I tell you something? Anything. I think I'm falling in love with you. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. I think I've been waiting my whole life for you to say that. He moved closer, and when he kissed me, it was nothing like the desperate, needy kisses I remembered from my marriage. This was different. It was a choice, not a plea. It was two whole people deciding to share something beautiful, not one broken person trying to fix themselves through someone else. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against his. I have to tell you something else. Okay. David is going to keep trying. Tonight was just the beginning. He's going to use every person in my life, every weakness he thinks he knows about, to try to get to Eleanor's money. Are you ready for that? Marcus's expression grew serious. Hallie, let me tell you something about myself. I've been documenting social justice stories for 15 years. I've been threatened, sued, and intimidated by people with a lot more power and resources than David Richmond. He doesn't scare me. He took my hands in his. But more importantly, this isn't about David. This is about us. And I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to. That night, Marcus stayed over for the first time. We didn't sleep together. We weren't quite there yet. But we fell asleep on the couch, wrapped around each other, and I woke up feeling safer than I had in years. But David wasn't done. Not even close. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Not from David, I'd blocked his number months ago, but from friends, acquaintances, and even some of the women from the foundation. Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee when I stumbled out, staring at my phone in confusion. "What's wrong?" he asked, handing me a mug. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach sinking with each one. "Oh my God," I whispered. "He didn't—" "What? What did he do?" I showed Marcus my phone. Every message was essentially the same. "Saw the news about you and David. So sorry this is all coming out publicly." Marcus grabbed his laptop and pulled up the Chicago Tribune website. There, on the front page of the society section, was a photo of David looking haggard and devastated, with the headline, "Richmond heir speaks out about contested inheritance. My late mother was manipulated by gold-digging daughter-in-law." "That son of a bitch," Marcus said quietly, scrolling through the article. "Listen to this. David Richmond, 36, claims that his late mother, Eleanor Richmond, was suffering from early-stage dementia when she changed her will, leaving her $8 million estate to his estranged wife, Hallie, rather than her only son. My mother was vulnerable and confused in her final months," Richmond stated. My wife took advantage of that vulnerability to manipulate a sick woman into disinheriting her own child. I felt sick. Keep reading. Richmond also alleges that his wife of 8 years abandoned him during his mother's illness, refusing to provide emotional support during his time of grief. Hallie disappeared for months after my mother's death, refusing to answer calls or respond to messages. She left me to grieve alone while she traveled the world spending my inheritance. He's lying, I said, my voice shaking with rage. About all of it. Eleanor wasn't sick. I didn't abandon him, and it's not his inheritance. Marcus kept reading. When asked about his current relationship status, Richmond confirmed that he is single and focused on contesting the will through legal channels. I believe in justice, he said. My mother would be horrified to know that her money is being used to fund my estranged wife's lavish lifestyle while I struggle to maintain the family business she built. Family business? I laughed bitterly. He doesn't even work there anymore. But Marcus had gone very still. Hallie, there's more. There's a photo. He turned the laptop toward me, and my blood turned to ice. It was a picture of me and Marcus having dinner at a restaurant last week, clearly taken with a telephoto lens. The caption read, Hallie Richmond enjoying an expensive dinner with an unidentified male companion, while her estranged husband grieves the loss of his mother and inheritance. He had us followed, I whispered. He's been having us followed. My phone rang. It was Dr. Chen. Hallie, are you okay? I just saw the Tribune article. I'm fine, I said automatically, though I clearly wasn't. It's all lies. Dr. Chen. Everything he said is lies. I know, sweetheart. I know. But we need to talk about how to handle this. Can you come in today? After I hung up, Marcus and I sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing what had just happened. He's escalating, I said finally. This is exactly what abusers do when they lose control. They try to destroy their victim's reputation, turn people against them. Marcus nodded grimly. The question is, what do we do about it? That's when an idea started forming in my mind. A crazy, risky, potentially brilliant idea. Marcus, I said slowly, how would you feel about moving up the timeline on your documentary? He looked at me questioningly. I mean, what if we didn't wait until you had months of footage? What if we responded to David's lies with the truth? The real truth, with evidence and interviews and Eleanor's own words. His eyes lit up with understanding. A counter-narrative. Show the world what really happened. Exactly. David wants to play this in the media? Fine. Let's play in the media. But let's play with the truth. Over the next week, Marcus and I worked around the clock to put together what we started calling the Eleanor Project. We interviewed Mr. Morrison, who provided legal documentation proving Eleanor's mental competency. We talked to Dr. Chen about the psychological impact of emotional abuse. We interviewed 3 of Eleanor's doctors, all of whom confirmed she'd been in perfect health, mentally and physically, right up until her death. But most importantly, we had Eleanor's own voice. The video she'd recorded explaining her decisions was powerful. But Marcus had discovered something even better while going through her personal effects. She'd been keeping an audio diary for years, recording her thoughts about David's marriage, her concerns about my well-being, and her growing disappointment in her son. With Mr. Morrison's permission, we included excerpts from these recordings. Eleanor's voice, clear and strong and heartbroken, talking about watching David destroy his marriage and his mother's trust in him. March 15th, Eleanor's voice said over a photo of her and me at tea. Had lunch with Hallie today. She's lost weight again, and there are dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer can hide. When I asked about David, she gave me that bright, fake smile and said everything was fine. But I see the truth. I see how small she's become, how carefully she chooses her words. I remember what it was like to live with a man who made me question my own reality. I won't let her suffer the way I did. April the 2nd. David came to see me today, asked to borrow money for what he called business expenses. But I know about the apartment he's renting for that woman. I know about the jewelry he's buying her with money from accounts that should be supporting his wife. He thinks I'm a foolish old woman who doesn't understand the modern world. He's wrong. May 10th. I've made my decision. David has shown me who he really is. And it's not the man I raised. Hallie deserves better than the scraps of affection he throws her way when he's not busy building a life with someone else. She deserves the chance to discover who she is when she's not walking on eggshells. The documentary was only 30 minutes long, but it was devastating. Marcus edited it with surgical precision, using David's own words from the Tribune article as a framework, and then systematically dismantling each lie with evidence and testimony. We released it on YouTube on a Friday afternoon, and by Monday morning, it had been viewed over 2 million times. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The comments section was filled with women sharing their own stories of emotional abuse and manipulation. Eleanor. News started trending on Twitter. The Tribune issued a retraction and published a follow-up article with the headline, "The Real Story Behind the Richmond Inheritance, a Mother's Love Letter to Her Daughter-in-Law." But the most satisfying response came from an unexpected source, Sophia Martinez. She reached out through her Instagram account, asking to meet with me privately. Against Marcus's advice, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, and the woman who walked in was nothing like the confident homewrecker I remembered from the will reading. She looked tired, stressed, and significantly more humble. "I saw your documentary," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "I need to apologize." I waited. "David told me so many lies about you. He said you were cold, that you didn't understand him, that your marriage had been over for years. He said Eleanor hated you and only tolerated you because she had to. He made me believe that I was saving him from a loveless marriage." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "But watching that documentary, hearing Eleanor's voice talking about how much she loved you, I realized that everything David told me about you was the opposite of the truth." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I have something you need." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos. "David doesn't know I still have these. Text messages, emails, voice recordings of him talking about his plans to get Eleanor's money back, including the conversation where he asked me to help him prove that Eleanor was mentally incompetent." She handed me her phone, and I scrolled through months of evidence that David had been planning to contest the will from the moment Eleanor died, messages where he talked about hiring private investigators to find dirt on me, where he strategized about using my own mother against me, where he bragged about manipulating the media narrative. "There's more," Sophia said quietly. "I recorded our last conversation when I told him I was leaving. He said some things about you that I think you should hear." She played the recording, and David's voice filled the space between us, slurred with alcohol and raw with fury. "She thinks she's so smart, but she's still the same pathetic woman who used to apologize for existing. I'll destroy her reputation, take her money, and make her beg me to take her back. She's nothing without me. She's always been nothing." Listening to those words, spoken by a man I'd once loved, I felt something final click into place. Not anger, not hurt, but absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice in leaving him. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked Sophia. She was quiet for a long moment. Because I have a daughter now, and someday, if a man ever talks about her the way David talks about you, I hope another woman would be brave enough to help her fight back. That evening, Mistress Morrison filed additional documentation with the court, including Sophia's recordings and text messages. Within a week, David's legal challenge to the will was not only thrown out, but he was facing charges for harassment, defamation, and attempted fraud. The judge's ruling was scathing. Mr. Richmond's attempts to manipulate both the legal system and public opinion through demonstrably false claims represent a fundamental abuse of the judicial process. This court finds his challenge to be not only baseless, but malicious in nature. But the most beautiful part came at the end of the judge's statement. Mrs. Eleanor Richmond's will stands as originally written. Her decision to leave her estate to Mrs. Hallie Richmond reflects not mental incompetence, but rather the sound judgment of a woman who understood the difference between the son she'd raised and the man he'd chosen to become. 6 months later, I was standing in the garden of the Hamptons Retreat Center, watching our latest group of graduates celebrate their completion of the program. 12 women who'd arrived broken and afraid were now laughing, hugging, making plans for their new lives. Marcus was there, camera in hand, documenting their stories for the feature-length documentary we were making about the foundation. But more than that, he was there as my partner, my equal, my person. We'd been officially together for 4 months, and it was nothing like the relationship I'd had with David. With Marcus, I didn't have to be smaller or quieter or more accommodating. He loved my opinions, my passions, my occasionally stubborn determination to help every woman who walked through our doors. "Hey," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we watched the celebration. "What are you thinking about?" "Eleanor," I said, leaning back against his chest. "I was thinking about what she said in that last letter, that sometimes the universe has to break us completely before it can rebuild us into who we're meant to be." "And who are you meant to be?" I thought about that question, really thought about it. 3 years ago, I would have defined myself through other people's eyes. David's wife, Eleanor's daughter-in-law, my mother's disappointing daughter. But now, I'm someone who helps other people remember their worth, I said finally. I'm someone who builds things that matter. I'm someone who chose love over fear, truth over comfort, growth over safety. Marcus turned me around to face him. "You're also someone who's about to be asked a very important question." My heart stopped as he dropped to one knee right there in Eleanor's garden, surrounded by women who were celebrating their own new beginnings. "Hallie Richmond," he said, pulling out a ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and completely unique. "You've taught me that love isn't about completing each other. It's about choosing each other every day. Will you marry me?" I looked down at this incredible man who'd seen me at my most broken and loved me back to wholeness, who'd stood beside me through media attacks and family betrayals, who'd helped me turn my pain into purpose. "Yes," I said, and then louder, for everyone to hear. "Yes." The women around us erupted in cheers, and as Marcus slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt Eleanor's presence so strongly it was like she was standing right beside us. That night, as we lay in bed planning our future, Marcus asked me one more question. "Any regrets? About David? About your mother? About any of it?" I thought about David, probably sitting alone in his studio apartment, still bitter about losing money that was never his. I thought about my mother, who'd stopped speaking to me entirely after the documentary aired. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be someone I wasn't. "No regrets," I said firmly. "Not a single one." Because all of that pain, all of that struggle, It led me here, to this life, to this work, to you. And what about Eleanor? Any final words for the woman who made all of this possible? I smiled, looking out the window at the stars over the Hamptons, feeling more grateful than I'd ever thought possible. Thank you, I whispered into the darkness. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for believing I was worth saving. And thank you for teaching me that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's living so well that your old life becomes unrecognizable. Because that's exactly what had happened. The woman who'd walked into that law office 3 years ago, broken and defeated, was gone forever. In her place was someone stronger, kinder, more purposeful, and infinitely more free. Someone who'd learned that her worth wasn't determined by who loved her, but by how well she loved herself and others. Someone who'd turned her greatest pain into her greatest purpose. Someone who was finally, completely, authentically herself. And that, I realized, was the real inheritance Eleanor had left me. Not just the money, but the permission to become who I was always meant to be. The woman David had tried to destroy was now helping other women discover their own strength. The woman my mother had deemed not enough was now enough for herself. The woman who'd once felt invisible was now impossible to ignore. I was Hallie Richmond, and this was my life. Messy, complicated, beautiful, and entirely my own. And I wouldn't change a single thing.